Thank you very much, Chris. A pleasant good evening to everyone. I hope everyone is excited to learn all about plants. Today, I will be given introduction to the botanical ecosystems of Trinidad and Tobago. So here's an outline of what I would be presenting this evening. Just a general summary. So let's get to it. What's so special about our botanical systems? Well, according to Mongabe, we are ranked as #1 in terms of being the most biodiverse country. And this is in reference to the land area. And if you let me get my pointer, yes, yeah, good. And this is in reference with the biodiversity index and land area. You see we rank #1. So the next time, someone says Trinidad is a tiny island, just tell them that tiny tropical countries are biodiversity champions. Due to our unique ecosystems, botanical ecosystems inclusive, you would see these ecosystems provide a home habitat for other unique and in some cases endemic species. So that's quite important. Now, Trinidad is quite unique in terms of when we look at the ridge to reef concept. So let's look at our highest peak, El Cerro de la Ripo. It's quite unique botanically. Trinidad, we are a small island and we have a wide variety of different ecosystems, and including our botanical ecosystems. They're pretty close by. It's a researcher's paradise. So we have peaks, summits. We don't really say that we have mountains. In one of the strictest sense, a geologist might disagree with us calling our peaks as mountain, because as I said, in one sense, a mountain can be defined as having a height taller than 100 meters. Unfortunately, we don't have any peaks taller than that. So just to be on the safe side, I would be referring to our high points as either summits or peaks. Similarly to rivers, we have few rivers in Trinidad. We have more streams, rivulets, ravine, whatever you want to call it. There are freshwater systems. So you see how unique we are. We have caves, lakes, we have a pitch lake, which is extremely unique. Salt ponds, we have different types of savannas, maybe grassland, scrubs, or marshes. And not to forget our marine system. So this is inclusive of like seagrass beds, mudflats, and coral reefs. Not to mention our different types of forested areas. Yeah, so when we think about botanical ecosystems, we are not only referring to forested areas. Okay, so we have a lot of conventions, legislations, acts, policies, laws, and these are some of the protections we have on our botanical areas. This is good news. However, we have to consider how much of these laws and regulations are actually being enforced. In terms of our geographical history, we have different pockets of unique bedrocks on the island. Let's give you an example. In Tobago, we have a unique forest. It's called an ultramafic forest. and it has a unique layer of shale and limestone. Also, we have similar pockets like throughout the inlets on the northwest coast and even the Toko district, okay? So let's look at our national, or rather natural vegetation class. When we think about botanical communities as a baseline, as a reference point, we would utilize Beard, natural vegetation class. And this was a really good work done back in the 1944. It has been done so well that we still use these classifications up to today. However, we modified, but in terms of the general audience, this might be a great starting point for understanding our botanical ecosystems. So let's talk about them in detail, because this would be one of the objectives of today's presentation. So let's start with montane rainforest. And you can see here that's purple, okay? I would have highlighted rainforest because in one sense, again, this is a strict sense, rainforest can be defined as having more than 250 millimeters of rainfall per month, similarly to what you would define as a mountain. So we only have two types of rainforests, which would be this purple area here and the lower montane forest, which would be the blue. Other than that, we just have forests, which we would normally call seasonal evergreen forests. Yeah, so just to put that out there. So in terms of the montane rainforest, this has been classified using elevation and even temperature. So it's above this particular elevation. Here in Trinidad, we have some unique species there, some endemics, some Clusia, some Utopi, croton, and even Anthuriums. Let's look at the second one, which is lower montane forest. They are characteristic of Seret and Mango, that's the mountain mango in particular. Looking at the third one, which would be the evergreen seasonal forest, and look at the elevation, these forests were classified. Mine, or rather correction, these elevation has been updated, and you will see it in the following slides to come. We have like crapo and water care, which would be characteristic of these seasonal evergreen forests. Let's look at number. So it's a deciduous seasonal forest, and it's this orange color, and you see it's limited to the northwest coast, and it's only found mostly on island, and there is also a islet here with this particular unique botanical ecosystem. Now these are characteristic of having saltfish wood and cactus. So let's build on Beard model. So next we have Helmer et al. And they would have created a forestry communities. So they have 6 groups, and group number 5 is more or less a good representation of Beard's classification. Here they would have utilized urban and built up land. And you can look at the key here. So this gray color, dark gray, light gray, these are urban areas. It's more detailed. So in terms of agricultural land, they would even go as far to say what type of agriculture, if it's herbaceous, if it's pasture, if it's grassy, if it's active or not. And when coming to the forest type themselves, you would see what particular species or plant or rather trees that dominate these forestry communities. So this is another good reference point for truly understanding botanical ecosystems here on the islands. So another modification, so Como et al. In 2016 would have utilized Beard and Helmer work, and they would have created a vegetation class. Okay, and this is the most recent class or document we would be working with, and they made some changes. You see we have rainforest here, mountain and sub-mountain instead of lower mountain. Look at the numbers, we have 1 and 2. So we only have mountain forests at our northern range, in particular El Cerro de la Ripo and El Tucuche. And we have some sub-mountain forests here in Tobago. They would have identified some other unique botanical ecosystems, such as the Erin Savanna, which is number 12, and Piaco Savanna, which is now an airport. So we don't have much vegetation representing this unique ecosystem, but we do have it here at the Erin site. This is not a protected area, and hopefully one day to come we can steward to get this savanna protected. Similarly to the deciduous coastal woodland. So it's just like a refinement of what Helmer would have done. Okay, so I downloaded this slide from the UE. This was in 2002. What they are presenting here are the land use types and the physiochemical surface water quality. And here we can see these dots here, the green dots indicate that we actually have clean water sources as opposed to polluted water sources, which would be closer to the towns, right? What I want you all to take home is look at the large large area that agriculture occupies, and even commercial, industrial, residents, because in my following slide, this is, if not the major threats that threaten our botanical ecosystems here in Trinidad. Here, I would have just downloaded this slide. It came from the State of World Plant and Fungi. This was a report that was done in 2020. And just to corroborate my point, agriculture and aquaculture, and we see in biological resource use, we see that these are the #1 threat in reference to threatened species here in this case, okay? So, I would have provided a very basic introduction of our botanical ecosystems here in Trinidad and Tobago. It's really too much to talk about each one of those ecosystem. If I have to summarize it, I would say in a nutshell, they are extremely important. They are threatened, and we should be interested in sustainably saving them, okay? So what is yet to learn about these botanical systems? My take-home point is to understand their importance, their threats, and how we as a country, how we as a people should transform the way we think, and one day we could be stewards for the environment and for our plant system. Now, in terms of importance, I think that the CBD national report did it well. They provide a general understanding. We all know how important botanical systems can be. Not much about species diversity, but that's another talk in its own. We are aware of the medicinal importance, ecotourism, food, ecological services, climate change, and the list goes on. Here, but if we have to break that down, just to ensure that you all, take home something, provisioning services, regulating services, and each one of these are quite important. Culture, yeah, that's extremely important. We as a country have to open up our eyes and see how important these botanical ecosystems are for us. Okay, so maybe this slide is a bit wordy, but it's important. In terms of threat, I'll be talking to you about plant blindness. Here we have a report from the IUCN list that was done in 2015. And this is in reference to level of threats, okay, to Trinidad and Tobago based on this particular listing. And you can see that we don't have much recorded for plants. And this is because not much research has been done because we don't have much people studying our unique ecosystem, which is a researcher's paradise. Okay, sustainability, another wordy slide. But I think that the NBSAP, which is the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, they summed it up well. It's there in our Sustainable Development Goals and National Biodiversity Targets. Hence the reason why I just randomly cut and paste this excerpt from this document. Generally, communication, education, public awareness. I think there's an acronym, it's called SIPA, communication, education, public awareness. So if we can keep that to the back of our mind, that's our formula for ensuring that our ecosystems are maintained and protected, hopefully at one day. So this is like a strategy promoting public participation. Again, it's quite important. If we don't understand what we have, how we as a people can make up our mind to protect it. Let's look at any point here. What is this? 1B. By 2020, at least, or rather at the latest, at least 30% of people are aware of the steps they can take to conserve and use biodiversity sustainably. So we have all these things in these governmental documents, these research papers, but are we enforcing it? And these are the risks that was recorded that we have in terms of schools are not open to change and the lack of capacity within the implemented agency. So there are a lot of red tapes involved, but this is a great starting point for sustainably maintaining our botanical ecosystem. Okay, I hope that was 10 minutes. Now that I would have fulfilled the aim of this evening's talk, which was to introduce you all to Trinidad and Tobago botanical ecosystem, and this was in commemoration of the International Year of Basic Science and Sustainability, that's from the UN. I would like to talk to you all about some things that I believe that are important to Trinidad and Tobago in reference to plants. Okay, so these involve plant blindness. We have a lack of botanical scientists, young and old. Most people, they would ask me about botany and how do you go about understanding it and practicing it. So I just want to give you all a basic introduction to it. And from there, I would provide a starting point because it can be a bit overwhelming, it can be a bit complicated. And last but not least, I can provide insights on how we should be moving on. Okay, so what is plant blindness and why do we need to overcome it? Now, plant blindness is the underappreciation of flora around us, all plants, yeah? Despite the fact that we depend on these plants for our very survival. If there wasn't any plants, we wouldn't be able to provide food, we wouldn't be able to eat, okay? I think that's quite fundamental. We would have learned that in our primary school. So plant blindness is more or less where someone would ignore plants and their importance. And talking about importance, most people would know about petroleum and that it's a fossil fluid derived from ancient remains of once living organism. Yeah, so we would say dinosaurs die and fossilize and we get petroleum. At least that's what I was told while I was growing up. But most persons do not know that most petroleum is derived from the remains of phytoplankton, okay, or phytoplankton. These are green algae, and this is millions of years ago. So right there, you can see that, you know, these plants, early life forms, early forms of plants, they are responsible for our petroleum deposits. Plant blindness, again, is the inability to distinguish between plants. So someone might look at a lush and beautiful tropical forest or one of our unique botanical ecosystems that we have here, and they would say, that's bush. That's a form of plant blindness. The only way we could overcome plant blindness is through cultural transformation and personal shifts. Okay, not just having a higher exposure to plants, but we really truly need to learn and understand plants, be more cognitive of plants. Okay, money, 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 money. So people can relate to money, and if we can use this form to educate people how important plants are and biological ecosystems are, hopefully we can break that cultural transformation. Maybe I can talk about this at some point, but not at this time in essence of time. Okay, so where are our nosy botanists? We have many, many people who love plants. They know something about plants, but we really need to get people knowing more. And I would term these people as not just botanists, but nosy botanists. You have to be inquisitive, you know, and that will help remove plant blindness and foster education and culture transformation. There are a few people here in Trinidad who studied botany professionally, but studying it is not just it. You have to be practicing it. You have to be an active botanist. I do not consider myself as an active botanist because I don't go out there that often and get down and dirty with these plants. Yeah, you always have to be interacting with these plants. Worse yet, there are even fewer people who study, or rather fewer young people who study plants, okay? So therefore, it makes sense to encourage young people to be cognitive about plant science. And plant science is not just classification, it involves the importance, ecology, and even identification. Okay, so creating botanical scientists, we should start from the younger generation. So I know this presentation will be recorded and most of it will be available on YouTube. And I trust that these young people can have a look and see what is needed to fill that gap. So you need to know what to notice, yeah? And with that information, you need to know how to identify what you are noticing. And botany is all about identification by elimination. And you need to know how to eliminate certain classifications, groups, family, classes, to come up with that identification. So that's quite important. So these are like a recipe on creating plant cognitive people, not just botanists. And you need to know how to use your resources. There are resources out there. You need to know how to use them. Most importantly, we talk about education and keep practicing. These 2 points would definitely help with culture transformation. So here we have a nosy botanist in the making with a little flower here, and she's looking at this Exora. She's getting older. Here we have her next to a rainbow eucalyptic tree, eucalyptus tree, correction. Here there was a stochastic event. There was some bamboo flowering. Most people don't know that bamboo flower. Yes, they do. They flower every 150 years. Humans don't live for more than 150 years, so not everyone will be able to see or experience this botanical phenomena throughout their lifetime. So this is what a bamboo flower looks like. Here we have her holding it. For her sake, we would just tell her some basic thing. This is a bamboo flower. This is what it feels like, and basic things to keep young children interested, so that when they go to elementary schools and primary schools, they can make that link. Okay, she's getting older here, and now she's looking at some of the ancient plants, which are the ferns, and so those are the ones that you would find in the crevices of your concrete, mosses and so forth, pteridophytes. Oh, this is my plant here for the competition. I know we have some people who were interested in from a group that I'm on, and they were interested in seeing my plant. So that's just a side point. Yeah, so you should show your children, your kids, different types of plants. I would explain these classifications can be quite simple. Most of us know some of the unscientific or informal names. Okay. Right, so that brings us to me just scratching the surface of tropical botany introductory field guide for identifying plants and trees here in Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, so what do we know about classification? Okay, so remember I said most people, they would link botany to classification. Botany is not just about plant classification, it's the scientific study of the physiology, the structure, genetic, there is some ecology there, and distribution, and even economic importance of plants. So knowing the economic importance of plants is, knowing botany. So internationally, or rather in the world, we have approximately 400 species of plants. Yeah, 390,900, I think that was reported from Kew in 2015. So how do we go about making sense of 400,000 species of plants? How do we do that? We classify them, yeah? We can classify them in some non-scientific grouping or scientific classification, and this is what botany is about. The scientific study, and classification is one of them. So I'm pretty sure You all can classify plants. You all know what a weed is, a vegetable, a fruit, flowers, for my plant people, ornamental plants, trees, mangroves. Some of you all may classify them as invasive or exotic, and that's all fine and well. They are accepted classification. But if you want to study plants scientifically, here are the major groups, okay? And these are terrestrial plants, because even before terrestrial plants, we had aquatic plants. And this was like 40 million years ago when we have the algae in the oceans that, as I mentioned before, was responsible for the petroleum that we have today. So mosses, ferns, conifers, and flowering plants. So if you look anywhere in the world, we can classify plants into these four groups, but that still isn't enough, right? So mosses are called bryophytes. I tell you what, I'll discuss that on the next slide. So let's talk about identification by elimination. So we still need to make sense of the madness, if I may. So we can classify plants into groups, into families, into orders, into class, but we have to dig further. Let me move forward. But even before moving forward, out of that 400,000 different types of plants we have here on Earth, 20,000 are the mosses, what we call the bryophytes. 13,000 are the ferns, the scientists, they would call that pteridophytes. We have just over 1,000 conifers, and these are what are referred as gymnosperms, or here in Trinidad we call them pine, and flowering plants, which accounts for the majority of plants here on Earth, and that's over 350,000. Now let's bring that in context to Trinidad. So in Trinidad, we have, according to the vascular checklist, this is Kumo et al. 2016, we have 3,639 vascular plants. From that, just 2/3 are native and 1/3 are exotic. Yeah, in terms of mosses or bryophytes, we do not know how much we have. We are still studying that. It takes a special group of people to study mosses, and that's why research is being done in this field. In terms of ferns, we have just over 300 different types of ferns here in Trinidad. We only have 10 conifers, or the gymnosperms. So if you want to, strike off one of these groups, conifers might be the easiest because they are temperate. They specialize in temperate regions. And we only have, as I said, just 10 species here in Trinidad. I think it's like 3 families. And angiosperms, well, as I mentioned before, that's just to the 600. Okay, so I don't want you all to be too confused with this slide, but this is the basics of studying botany. Again, we are scratching what is botany. So we look at the algae here. These are one of our older forms of plants. They were just a cell at some point, and then they multiplied, became multicellular, and they decided to leave the ocean, and that's where we get the terrestrial plants here. And as I mentioned, the bryophytes, which consist of the liverworts, the mosses, which is what we would refer to as the major component of the groups, and the hornworts, okay? Those are non-vascular. In terms of vascular plants, we have the ferns. So ferns is here, yeah? as I said, fancy name for fern pteridophytes, which consists of club mosses and ferns. And then we transit from that, what should I say, that middle stage to go to the more modern plants, which would be the gymnosperms and the flowering plants. Gymnosperms, they are vascular because they have roots and stem. They reproduce by having naked seeds, so they don't have flowers, okay? And that's why they are called naked seed plants or gymnosperms. And then we have angiosperms, which are the flowering plants, okay? Okay, so at this point, I would like to talk to you all about ranking plants. And that's a problem we have here, not just in Trinidad, but throughout the world, where we rank plants. And that's the opposite of botany. And this is using non-scientific explanation or classification. So we look at this plant, this is a water hibiscus, and we say, okay, it's not a tree, it's not a vine, it's a succulent. Look at the leaves, it's compound. Okay, it's green, yeah. Here we have a spider flower, okay. It's a succulent, and we are seeing similar leaves, okay. So we can rank these as being the same, but that would be a mistake. Let's go one step further. Here, oh, sorry, this is the water hibiscus, and this would be the spider flower, Cleomene, from the Cleomaceae family. Okay, so we can say, okay, this is what this group of plants flower, this is what it would look like. Again, that's ranking, okay? We don't want to do that. And I have one more specimen here that looks similar. Most of you all may know, I hope not much, what this plant is. It's the marijuana plant. So look at these different plants belong to different families, okay? So if we were to rank them, we would be doing injustice to botany. Yeah, we'll be doing the opposite of what botanists do. What botanists do, they rank, sorry, they don't rank, they classify, and they use the process of identification by elimination. And they utilize this category, and this particular family, Euphorbiaceae, it says something about these plants. So you would expect any plant in this family to share similar characteristics. Okay, so that's the mindset we have to adjust to. Just to put it out there, there's no criteria for recognizing family. It's all a running hypothesis. Okay, let's look at the Boranganaceae family. Okay, in time, we have taxonomic and movement and notes on this particular family, and then there are always a name change, consistently name changes. So we don't learn off scientific names. We don't even learn off family names. What we do, we learn the characteristics of each family, because guess what? They can change. And here are some name changes. Over the year, Tababia went to Handranthus, Clydemia went to Myconia. Let's look at one that everyone should know, Asclepiaceae, no. Okay. So Tababia, this is the yellow pui. So it was once fell in the genus Tababia, but now it has been moved, and this is due to DNA barcoding and biotechnology. So point to take home here, it's always a hypothesis. We always, when we name plants, it can always change. So instead of naming a plant and remembering this particular name, we try to remember the families and what these families recommend. So that was a bit of plants here in Trinidad. Sorry, botany, a scratch of it. And let's create some starting points. Remember, I said there are 400,000 species of plants out there. How do we make sense of it? How do you, as a naturalist here in Trinidad, make sense of it? So what we can do now, we can look at the top 10 neotropical woody plant species. We chose woody plant species. Remember, there are mosses, there are ferns, there are the conifers and the flowering plants, but we would stick to the flowering plants because that's what we can see, and not just the succulents and the monocots, but the large ones that are easy for us to identify. Okay, so using the Gentry network and the Amazon tree diversity what's that database, during my botany course, we would have classified or found out the top 10 families here within the neotropics. And the criteria would be based on diversity, which is species richness per family. The abundance simply means the number of stem, how abundant they are, how numerous they are, okay? And the ethnobotanical use. So again, these are the criteria used, okay? And the algorithm would have produced this output. And you can see it's species rich, it's very abundant. It has some ethnobotanical uses. Okay, so I'm just gonna touch on these a bit before we move on. So what I'm gonna do is start with the top 10 here in the neotropics, yeah, regionally, and then I'll do a top 10 for Trinidad and Tobago, and then I'll do my top 10. So again, these are 3 different starting points. Choose one. So even before we can understand these top 10 families, maybe Fabaceae, Rickeaceae, Sapotaceae, or Myrtaceae, we have to understand some of these characteristics. But in order to understand these characteristics, we need to understand the grammar, the language. It's like you can't watch a football match and understand it unless you understand the roles, the different names of the field, players, you know, the rules of the game. Similarly to playing, chess, you have to learn about it before you can actually participate. So before you can go out there and identify plants, what you need to do is to learn the definitions. So I'm going to bring everyone back to their primary school days, dicot versus monocot. You have to know the difference. What I do, I envision the base of the tree and think about roots, and then I think about the stem, then I think about the leaves, I think about the flowers and the seed. And there are differences between monocots and dicots. It's referred to as eudicots and the dicots because there are exceptions to the dicots, which leads me to introduce the concept, we don't apologize for plants. So you might see, or you might learn that this particular family does this, and then there will be an outlier. And you would say, but how does that particular character fall within that family? It simply means that it's a running hypothesis and we haven't come up with the level of research to make a better hypothesis, and hence the reason why names change, okay? So I'm not going to talk about the differences too much, but these are the things we have to look out for. Leaf phyllotaxy, or the arrangement of leaves. We have discus, discussate, whorl, opposite. You would need to know the difference between a simple leaf, which is an undivided blade, as opposed to a compound leaf, which is a divided blade. You'll have to know about different types like pyropenate, palmate, unifolia, and the list goes on. Again, this is not to frighten you, it's just to let you know what you should be looking out for. When you see a plant there and you want to get it identified, these are some features that will help us to characterize it and come up with a species name. Stipules are very important, yeah? Let it be intra, inter, or adnate. Exudate. Now, exudate is a fancy name for secretory substances. We have mucus, we have latex, we have resins, and we have gums. Yeah, so any secretory fluid coming out from the plants, that's very characteristic. We can put it down to a species level. So that's something you all have to look out for. Centered or non-centered, there's something called pelusa dots, which are made in the ethereal oil cells. And they are characteristics of certain family like the Myrtaceae, the Lauraceae family, Rutaceae. So again, this is something you should be knowledgeable about, meaning that you should smell plants. Indumendum, their presence and absence. Again, this is a fancy term for the texture. These are like hairs, minute hairs. Some plants have really large ones, some have it so small you really can't see it unless you look through the microscope, okay? So I must thank the University of Florida, UIF, Florida International University, and my professor, the esteemed Walter Judd, Dr. Christopher Baralotto, and Dr. Lucas. When I was there, they were in the process of creating a field guide, a vegetation or vegetative field guide that you can actually use on the field. So this is actually waterproof. It gives you an indication of what you have to look out to identify plants. We spoke about growth form, leaf type, the exudate. Remember, that's the secretory material coming out from the plant. Fruit type. If you want to go advanced, we have the floral formula. So these are for like the botanists. And we have the seeds type and fruit type. Okay, so I'm not going to go through these, but what it says is that Fabaceae on the whole, any Fabaceae you look at, we have just under 20,000 species from over 700 genus. All Fabaceae, they fall within, they can be a tree, a shrub, subshrub, or a herb. They all have stipules, yeah? So always keep that in mind, and they actually have special features. This mightn't be the best one for me to explain, because there are some subfamilies that can confuse you, like the Dateroideae. They are known to have intra-petiolar stipules, Sesopinoideae, Mimosidaceae, they have something called pleurogram present. It's quite unique. So let's get something simple. Palms. Everyone know what a coconut tree look like. So I'm not making this up. Every single palm tree, their leaves have what we call plications, and they can be reduplication or enduplication, and all palms have a large endosperm, right? This is the storage part of the seed. All palms, their margins have smooth leaf margins. It can vary from being a tree, a shrub, or a vine. And there are special features to help you identify them. Right, so I'm just going to run through these. Rubiaceae, Moraceae, this is your châtaigne and your breadfruit. They all have what we call apical stipule. Yeah, they all have that, and they all have exudates. Lauriaceae, Annonaceae, Sapotaceae. These are the characteristic features of Sapotaceae. White, they all have latex. Sorry, exudate. In this case, it's a latex. Most of it is white, but there are few. Remember, I said we don't apologize for plants, so we cannot say that all the latex in this particular family is white. There are maybe one or just two species that have different colors. Malvaceae, Malvaceae, Burseraceae, Myrtaceae. Yeah. Okay. So that was the top 10 neotropical woody plant families. Now we're going to remove, or rather step away from the neotropics and focus more heavily on Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, and here we are seeing the top largest families in flora of Trinidad, and this was taken from the checklist of vascular plants, table 10 to be exact. And here we are seeing that we have an overlap of 7 different families. I would have highlighted these that falls within this group. It just goes to say that it's quite dominant. There are different criterias for coming up with this list. And as a botanist, we have to understand these criterias. Okay, so in Trinidad, if you were to look outside or look outdoor, we have a lot of Fabaceae, yeah? And we have plenty grasses and Orchidaceae, orchids, yeah? Which is a ornamental paradise for people who love ornamental flowers, okay? So if you can get your hands on this flora as a starting point for those of you who are at that level, you all could just record these family names, and you can go on YouTube, you can go on Google, normal Google search, type up a family name, Poaceae, and we can see the characteristic features, and we can work with that. Yeah, hopefully, maybe in the future, I can get some time to talk to you all some more about the major family groups we have here in Trinidad. So this brings me to my top 10, okay? This is quite simple. These are the indigenous tree species, yeah? I try to keep it as natural as possible, because if I did not do that, I would have included some exotic tree species. Here's a key: absent, low, moderate, high, or both. Just for the younger audience, indigenous simply mean it originates or it occurs naturally at a particular place. So when you're using the term indigenous, you don't say it's indigenous, you always say it's indigenous to somewhere. Okay, so we are going through these 10 indigenous trees. I'm pretty sure most of my fellow naturalists would know what they are. So if you were to test my theory, most people should know what a hog plum look like, what a hog plum tree look like. We have the leaves. So we would have, we know what type of leaf, or we should know what type of leaf are characteristic of this particular family, Anacardiaceae, the floral type, and the fruit type, okay? So here we have some useful, interested points that people may be interested in. I just decided to put that out there, as this was an introduction to our indigenous plants. Cocorite, now they are one of the most abundant palm species we have in Trinidad, and they are found throughout the islands, okay? I'm not going to read my slides. I'm just going through again what time it is. I'm pretty sure I don't want to be talking for too long. So we have yellow puyi, buffalo, bacano, yeah. So, and these are quite dominant in the urban places. Yeah, we have even buffalo, yeah. Royal palms, again, so we see palm tend to top this list. Angeline, much of you all may know, be knowledgeable about the Angeline, but if you look at the fruits and if you look at this flower, you all may know them. Red mangrove, now this may be less because of its dominance, yeah. Even before I get there, what I should have said, right, was what was the criteria I used for coming up with my top 10. So over the years, as being a nosy plant person, I came up with this list while driving, hiking through the major locations in Trinidad and Tobago and our major forests on both islands. The two categories would be the most cited and the most numerous. Okay, so density and how often we would see these trees. Okay, so I think I was like almost done. So after red mangroves, we had the white olivier, and they tend to make the list because they are quite numerous in our forests. Local cedar also made that list as number 10. Okay, now, so what about the other indigenous tree species that did not make the list? We have balata, crapo, wild nutmeg, maho, padu with an asterisk on that. We don't apologize for plants. Mora, silk cotton, water care. I'm pretty sure people are shaking their heads. Yeah. Okay. So these are other indigenous trees that didn't make the list, but they are quite numerous and abundant here in Trinidad. And I expect people to know these species. I'm sure that some of you all may be asking yourself, why wasn't bamboo in the list? Well, don't be fooled. Bamboo is not indigenous. It's not native to Trinidad and Tobago. It's actually native to Indonesia and that particular area. Bamboo is what we refer to as being naturalized or established. And what does that mean? It means that they have been around for so long, they survived. They not only survive, but they reproduce and increase substantially in the wild for many years so that they become naturalized. We have teak, pink puyi, water immortal, and this has been planted and has been naturalized in our cocoa estate and our secondary forest. Yeah. Just to name the others, wild shatine, coconut, mango. Yeah. Everyone should know what a mango and coconut tree look like. These are naturalized species. Maybe in the future, what I can do is do a non-indigenous top 10 or even an exotic top 10. I'm almost through. Just to give you all an idea of some plants you should not be touching. Again, most people may have this idea, as the name suggests, stinging nettles, yeah, lapotia, mucunia, cow itch. I don't expect anyone to be touching the mucus of dasheen or Edo's plant, lantana. We have to be careful with some of the ornamental plants. Dogtooth, again, I don't think anyone would be touching those families. Some more castor oil, manganine. These are things that we know, sandbox, nutmeg, that latex can irritate you. We have another form of stinging nettles that we find in the forested area, and so forth, okay? So what do you think about plants now that I'm more or less finished with my presentation? So I hope you, your mind frame, or rather your mindset for connecting plants to the wider context. You not only see them as being beautiful in some instances, you understand their role, their importance, especially when we talk about the ecological systems. It can save us, these botanical ecosystem can save us plenty money, flooding, floodwater retention, water purification. If we were to create artificial plants to do these ecological services, it will cost the country millions of dollars. You can ask China, Pakistan, and these other large countries. Yeah. So we spoke about plant blindness. Yeah. And we know that we have to break that that mental block, and only through culture reformation that can be done. We need to understand that before we can even move forward. So if we don't understand the importance of it, how can we move forward and really truly appreciate plants and what they do for us? So we have to embrace that. Yeah, again, understand what it takes to be a plant enthusiastic or even a nosy botanical scientist. So what's next? Maybe I can find some time to do some additional talks if you guys are interested. What would be great to do is talk about identification by elimination. Yeah, and this is using the dichotomous keys. And that's a very fundamental piece of tool we use when identifying plants, okay? So just to give you all an excerpt from one of our botany trips, this was taken from the Field Naturalist Quarterly Bulletin, I think, 2020, issue 3, page 5. So when we went out, what did we do? We not only look at the plants, but we were able to explain or rather show the characteristics of each plant and why we put them into a family. So remember I showed you that picture. Okay, let me get to that. I showed you this photograph here of Euphorbiaceae. And if someone were to say this coral bush is Euphorbiaceae, and you rank that anything that look like coral bush is Euphorbiaceae. Maybe when you go on the field, yeah, I hope everyone can see this. That's one reason why I didn't use my camera, because it might affect, it might slow down the presentation. Yeah, so when you think about Euphorbiaceae, you don't think about what I just showed you. You think about these characteristics here. And if you come to our botany trip, this is what we do when we go out on the field. So you would know that all Euphorbiaceae have a latex. It can be one in Trinidad, in Africa, in America, you name it. You always look for a white latex. You always look for glands. If you were to break this leaf, you would see a white latex. These are the glands here, right? So everything that falls within that family would have that. Also, stipules are mostly present, but there are some rules and some exceptions. For the other one, we have Melastomataceae. Again, these are the characteristic features. It simply means that all melastomes have opposite leaves. Yeah, don't be fooled. Okay, they have checkerboard, their leaf veins, or what we call acrodromas. and so forth. And for the other, I think I mentioned Pelusa dots. Now this is characteristic of a certain family, Anonaceae, yeah, Anonaceae. And this is what Pelusa dots look like. And this is where the cells would produce ethanol oils, and this is what you would get a scent, yeah? So I'm gonna stop there. No, I can't. I have to give you the resources. So a starting point, dating from the older documents from the more recent apps, we can go with the 1980 Inventory of Indigenous Forests of Trinidad and Tobago, and these are more for just forested species. We have a guide of wildflowers, and this is available through the club, and I'm sorry that I didn't put a picture of what they look like. So this is a really good starting point for children. For others, native trees of Trinidad and Tobago. If you are interested in the pteridophytes, which is a fancy word for ferns, we have a checklist here. We haven't, or as I said, we don't have much botanists. Had we had enough, by now we would have come up with a guide for pteridophytes or ferns in Trinidad and Tobago. But we did come up with a wildflower guide in 2014. Well, I mentioned the vascular plants, that catalog. Another good starting point is, or rather resource, is looking at our botany reports from the quarterly bulletin. We have the National Herbarium of Trinidad and Tobago, their website. You would learn a lot about plants there and what they look like, especially using the information that we would have provided. Now you can look at the voucher specimen and compare it to what you have in your backyard. And last but not least, iNaturalist. That's an app that we can use. Again, maybe at some point I can go through how we can utilize these resources. I'm doing a short lecture for a tropical garden, and this will be next month. I'm not so sure at what level it's going to be, but it depends on the on our group, our crowd. I'll have to tweet it, maybe make it less technical or even more technical. It depends on our participants. So I'd like to thank these people and these institutions, and that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Linton. I would like to thank you for an interesting look at the botany of Trinidad and Tobago, some food for thought and for more research. And thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you. Pleasure was mine.
Okay, everyone, and that's it for our meeting tonight. Have a good evening, everyone.